Welcome to the Authentic Physician Show, where we have honest conversations about medicine, identity, and health transitions women aren't prepared for. If you're a woman juggling work, caregiving, and a body that no longer responds the way it used to, you're in the right place. Today's conversation is not about perfection, it's about truth. It's about you. Let's dive in. Hi, Dr. Vanessa. I am so glad you're here with me today. I am excited to learn more from you.
Hello, Dr. Amy.
It is my real pleasure to have you on the show. We connected through a mutual acquaintance, but we haven't actually made it to a coffee shop where we can just hang out and chat. So we're going to pretend to do that now today. And I am really overwhelmed with how much you have done in the world and how much impact you have made. But I wonder if there's a couple of things that you'd like to share with the audience about who is Dr. Vanessa. Kind of tell us what's important to you when you're not wearing all the credentials.
Um, yeah, sure. I think a few things that might just shed some light into maybe the things we might get into later are I am first generation Latina, come from parent of immigrants. My mom immigrated from Mexico, my dad from El Salvador. Uh, they were farm workers in the Central Valley of California, where I was born and raised. Before medicine, I was a social justice activist and community organizer. I spent a lot of time doing that work. Then I went to med school because I really wanted to serve my community. My goal had always been to serve serve folks that didn't have access to health insurance or didn't have access to high quality care or were in under resourced communities. So I went to med school, and in med school, they say once an activist, always an activist, and I firmly believe that. So I sort of kept that activist spark and did a lot of work in medical school. Worked in free clinics and helped govern and run those clinics and stayed involved in getting access to care for patients. I went to Washington, D.C., and I worked as a director of policy. And actually, what I did is I would travel around the country and work with physicians and medical students and teach them how to advocate for their patients, make sure their patients were getting what it is that they needed. And went on to become an emergency medicine doctor. And because emergency medicine, as you and I know, is the one field of medicine where no matter the age, the race, the gender, ability to pay, whether or not you're documented, we're going to take care of you 100% of the time, 24 hours a day. And for me, just philosophically, that really aligned with why I went into medicine. Plus, I love the procedures and I love the fast paced nature of the emergency department. So I did that for about 15 years and was a leader in the emergency department, department chief, medical director, did national board work, med exec work for a really long time, and then started developing people. I started developing my teams because I was so committed to our patients and our patient outcomes. And to have good patient outcomes, you have to have good clinicians, good physicians, and advanced providers that really, really care about the patients and were not burnt out and could show up to work and just show up as their best. So I started doing what I needed to do to develop my own teams. And along the way, I got asked to help other people do the same thing. And so I started doing this regionally and then nationally, and I transitioned to now support physicians and advanced providers and other leaders and female leaders, female entrepreneurs, and physicians, just supporting them in well-being and creating a life that they can be really happy and proud of, while also living their work and their mission.
Beautiful. I knew I couldn't say it as beautifully as you could, so thank you. The first time you told me a little bit about yourself, I knew we had to have you. And one of the things that strikes me about your story is there's a theme that runs through from childhood all the way to even being here today and serving in this podcast. You don't know who will hear your message and be encouraged by it or motivated by it. The idea of caregiving is often assumed of women, that role of caregiving, even if they're working outside the home. And I'm wondering, listening to you talk, did that come naturally to you from a very young age? Was that something that you think your culture helped build? How did that evolve for you as you
Yeah.
went on this journey? Or has that something that I don't even know how to ask it the right way because I just wonder, is this a nurture only situation or is this something that is intrinsic to you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I come from a long line of folks that are just service oriented.
Mhm.
Some of my lineage are ancestral healers, and some of my lineage, and just as an example, my mother served as the first female and Latina, first immigrant mayor of her town. So to give you a background of kind of, I was raised in a house that really cared about service,
Yes.
and really cared about giving back and cared about giving back to our community, about lifting people up. That's just kind of the conversations we'd have around our
Mhm.
table. And when I was a very little kid, I can tell you, I remember I was like 4 or 5 years old because I was at church and there were these missionaries there telling us about their story and collecting funds for their mission. And I remember right away being like, that's exactly what I'm going to do with my life. And I knew when I was 5, people ask, like, when did you
Mhm.
know you were going to be a doctor? So I remember saying that I was going to be a missionary doctor. I didn't know any doctors.
Interesting.
I'd never met a doctor
Mhm.
before in my life. But I knew I wanted to travel the world and I knew I wanted to be in service and I knew I wanted to be a physician. And yeah, so I think this was innate more, and I think I was just born this way, but I think just like everything is genetic, it was probably
Mhm.
also genetic. I come from a line, I think, of people that are just committed to doing good in the
Mhm.
world.
That's who
In
you are.
fact, yeah.
I love that. It's just and I think maybe it resonates so strongly for me because we are all asked, of course, when we go to medical school, "Why do you wanna be a doctor?" Right? But there's something in each of us, I think, that really goes to the heart of what it means to be a healer and give beyond yourself and connect with another human in a way that's meaningful and impactful. I'm not gonna pretend that none of them are selfish reasons ever, but I do think that the people who stay in medicine tend to have that attribute. When I think about the emergency room and I think about all the bells and the noise and the pace and the fear and the angst, there's so many big emotions that come up on the side of the person in the patient hat, their family, but also on the side of the person who's taking care of them. Am I doing the right thing? Am I finding it fast enough? Am I helping this person? What am I missing? And I remember that very distinctly from the different emergency rooms. I trained in New York City and it was busy. Did some work in Dallas and Chicago, two emergency rooms. So I just think about that. And I'm not an emergency room doctor, right? So you know this more fully. And I wonder, as you reflect on those experiences, did you get to a point where you yourself were feeling burnt out from giving and giving and giving? Or did you already have this ability to be resilient and buffer up against that as you went through those experiences? Because they are very demanding.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just personally believe physicians are some of the most resilient human beings that exist. I don't think we could not be resilient and be where we are. I also think just by human nature, humans are some of the most resilient species walking the planet. I think it was a gift given to us divinely to be resilient because how could we have survived? It's hard to be human. There's so
Yes.
much suffering, there's so much tragedy happening in the world. We have big emotions, we have a limbic system, we have really big
Yes.
emotions. And so it's really tough to walk this planet, and navigate all of our responsibilities with all of the different titles mother, professional, all of these things that we do. So I think humans are just by nature really, really incredibly resilient. The human spirit is so resilient. And I think physicians are especially resilient. Um, and yeah, I think we grow up, coming from not a lot, very under resourced. My parents, like learning how to do a lot of the things yourself because just the way it was. My parents worked a lot. You grow kind of a muscle of grit, I think. But I think I'll tell you kind of the balance because I think by nature we're strong, quote unquote strong and resilient, and we're not meant to do any of this stuff by ourselves. We're not meant to navigate this world by ourselves. I'm not meant to lead the entire department by myself and never ask for help. And I do think, and you can tell me what your experience was, Amy, but when we're training in medicine, especially the generation that you and I both trained in, we are taught to be super strong and never ask for help
Mhm.
and have all the answers and know
Right.
everything and never be vulnerable. And that comes into conflict with what we're
Mhm.
actually experiencing out in the real world. And so I'll tell
Yes.
you, I didn't get burnt out from my clinical work. I absolutely love being an emergency medicine physician. Love it. Love everything about it. I love showing up. I love being able to help. They're the most vulnerable. I love talking to their patients. I mean,
Mhm.
the families. I love all of it. I love the emergency department. And I'll tell you, when I was a physician leader, when I was a department chair, navigating the emergency department, navigating COVID, and
Mhm.
I was our hospital incident commander at a time when COVID first started, navigating all of those things and trying to do it all by myself, like never tapping my teams, never asking people for help because I had been trained that I'm supposed to do it
Right.
all alone and that asking for help meant weakness.
Mhm.
That is where I burnt out. The first time I burnt
Yes.
out in medicine was because of that, because I
Mhm.
had all of these things happening at the same time and I didn't want to ask for help.
Yes. I think that is an astute point, and maybe one that maybe not those in medicine don't realize. And it starts a little bit in medical school. You have these hyper rigid type A personalities just trying to survive medical school and not outcompete or eat each other. But then, at least in most of the residency experiences I had, it was very much you better be dying if you call out. Like you better be hemorrhaging and your leg falling off. It has to be something major. And I'm using hyperbole here, but it wasn't, I don't feel well. I need to take a mental health day. That just didn't exist, right?
There was a story in my residency of one of my senior residents. She was my senior resident. She had 3 kids, and her second kid, she went into labor while she was running a trauma.
Ooh.
And she went into labor running the trauma, finished the trauma, and then went to go deliver her baby. And so there was always this story. Of course, it's like a badge of honor we wear, you know?
Mhm.
So it's
Right.
always like, "Oh, you're going to call out sick. What are you actively in labor?" And it was
Right.
always this thing like we weren't supposed to do that. And I fully bought into that concept,
Mhm.
fully,
Right.
and it was super unhealthy.
Yes. When it's all you know, though, when you
Yeah.
that's the model that's shown to you, you don't realize. And I don't know about other professions, but medicine's a little bit quirky on this because if you don't finish residency, that has big ramifications in the US on what you can do with your career. It's not it's actually interesting how many people now are not going that road and creating their own careers. But at least historically, you had to finish residency. And
And
so,
yeah, and for those listening, there's a bunch of rules as to how you
yes.
finish residency and your funding for residency and all these. So you can't just take maternity leave and come back. It's not
Mm-mm.
that simple.
No, not at all. I actually my daughter, my oldest, was born my 3rd year of residency, and I'm internal medicine trained, so, for our audience, that's our last year, and I actually had to work an additional 2 weeks just because I ended up with a C-section, so I had 8 weeks of
Mm.
maternity leave instead of 6 weeks, and so most of my peers had left, and I had to put in another 2 weeks because of that, so it's very rigid. And there's so you're very powerless as a resident. You have to do what they want, and there is no discussion. That's improving in some places, and I applaud all the efforts that people are doing to make it better. But we're not there yet. On the flip side, I'm married to an attorney, and I take care of a lot of attorneys and professional women, and I don't know that they are immune from some really toxic training environments either. So acknowledging that and realizing that we all want to be heard. We all want to be seen. We all want to feel valued. It becomes important to hear the stories. And so that's why I wanted to know who are you, right? Like I can tell you're an amazing doctor with all your credentials, but who are you really? And that warmth that you're sharing and that love for healing and giving and service is beautiful. So thank you for being vulnerable with us and showing us that. If we narrow the scope a little bit now and think about women who are in their, we'll say 30s, 40s, and 50s, there's a lot of transitions often for women in those ranges, whether they're having kids, whether they're getting married, divorced, new job, old job, perimenopause, all of the things, right? In your work as an emergency room doctor, or maybe in some of the roles you've had mentoring and coaching, I'm curious, are there certain beliefs that you find we have about women's health that we need to change?
Oh, that's so good. That's a juicy question.
Go
Uh,
wherever you want with it.
yeah, I think there's so many things here. Number one, I think that women, I think, start to feel quote unquote broken after, especially after if you have kids and the birth is traumatic at all.
Mhm.
Um, there's there's a lot that can happen after. I'm a mother of 2 kids, or if you're not able to get pregnant.
Yes.
That is a big one, and I'll just share, we got pregnant with our first child when I was in residency still, and it was thank God, like, it was easy. It was easy, and so I thought it was gonna be just as easy for the second kid, and so when we tried to get pregnant a second time, it wasn't. We had a really tough time. I had 3 miscarriages, and the third one, I was actively miscarrying when I was on shift in the emergency department. It was further along, and so it was all horrible, traumatizing. And so then I had all these stories like, what happens if I can't get pregnant? Is something wrong with me? It's like all of these stories that we tell ourselves. And so I'll start there with just like the level of like deep, deep compassion for women walking this planet because we're told by society we're supposed to fit certain things and do certain things to be valuable. One of them is be a mother.
Yes.
And there's such a anti-natal movement, like if you don't
Mhm.
get pregnant, what does that mean about you? Why wouldn't you want to get pregnant? That's so selfish. Like
Yeah.
it's wild. It's like a woman will be selfish for doing anything in the world that's
Mhm.
not for her, even
Mhm.
if it's like if it's choosing to have too many kids, you're being selfish. If it's choosing to have 0 kids?
Right.
So I think that that's a big one. And then, as we continue to go on, things will change in our bodies and we have not been taught how to give ourselves grace and how to give
Right.
ourselves compassion. And I'm so grateful that people like you exist because you out there like helping women come home to their bodies when they're going through the biggest changes that we experience. We have a huge change in our bodies at 13, when we start our menstrual cycle, which most women are ashamed of. Nobody even wants to
Mhm.
talk about. And
Right.
in some societies, it's a beautiful celebration. It's like this welcome. That's what we're
Yeah.
doing in my house. We're having a big party. I already told my daughter, get ready.
I love it.
But it's not like that in a lot of societies. And then we have this other big transition when we have kids. And then again, when we go through perimenopause and menopause. And there hasn't been anybody there guiding us with love and compassion and warmth and gentleness and sort of the feminine type of leadership that we need until very
Mhm.
recently. Very
Yes.
recently, what's been happening has been such a gift to women. And
Mhm.
you're one of the doctors providing that for women. And I'm just so grateful that people like you exist.
It is shocking to me how little we're prepared for this, both in medical school and then as humans, right? It is v every day I hear women tell me their story, and they'll say, "I was dismissed, I wasn't heard by other women," right? And then I sit around and I think, "Well, what were those other women ever taught?" Right? The same thing I was never taught.
Yeah.
And I just happen to be a little bit further on my learning journey about it than others do, right? And so we need to be pulling each other up and over and through this instead of bashing each other down and hurt climbing on each other. So that's why I was curious what your thoughts were. On the flip side, is there a belief that you hold dearly about women's health that you just absolutely refuse to compromise on?
Ooh, I haven't thought about that. That we are healthy and we're so much healthier and so much stronger than we think.
Hmm.
I think our mind is so limited by what we see and believe. And if we let our mind be in charge, then we won't lift the heavy weights. We
Right.
won't continue to do what it is that our bodies need. We won't put ourselves first. We won't advocate for ourselves. But and gosh, if I can give one woman a belief, is that you are 100% whole and complete and you're so much
Yes.
stronger than you believe. And
Yes.
because that will give you compassion and strength. I want every woman in this world to walk with so much compassion because I think that if I could prescribe one thing, I'll tell you, Amy, in like the 20 years that I've been like practicing both medicine, leadership, and now coaching work, if I could prescribe one magic pill, it would be
Hmm.
self compassion because
Yeah.
self compassion is like, I think it's the antidote to almost everything we experience out there. So much suffering.
I like where you're going with this too, because you're focusing on something that I don't think most physicians hear. Coaches, we hear it more often. I certainly don't hear it when I'm wearing my patient hat, though, which is the idea that my thoughts have an impact on how I show up in
Mm,
the world. Different holy books talk about the Bible, for example, talks about that, but I don't think we as a culture understand how powerful our brain is and the thoughts and how many thoughts we tell ourselves without even saying a word. And so many patients I see in the exam room, I'll give you an example. I call it catastrophic thinking. Other people might use the term black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, but it's this idea that if I blew my, we'll say, diet, quote unquote, at lunch, I'm done for the rest of the day. I might as well just eat whatever I want. I'm done for. I'll have to start over tomorrow. When the truth is, okay, did you really blow it? Number one, or are you going to learn from this? And what are you going to do differently this afternoon, this evening, tonight? But that's not something that I learned in middle school or medical school, right? I don't think people have been taught that, and yet it's so empowering. One of the things you made me think of too when you were describing your role in leadership and in coaching, I wonder, does this at all feel like we under target ourselves on goals? The idea where I'm going with is like stretch goals, for example, right? Are we
Mhm.
not stretching high enough? Are we not thinking about what stretching means? Are we just treading water because we've got two full-time jobs, one we're paid for and one we're not, and we're trying to make do? Where does that concept fit in of moving forward and continually growing
Mm.
when you are in this area of life that's got so many other pieces?
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts around this because I coach a lot of high achieving, high functioning folks, and I coach a lot of folks who have a deep value of growth, of personal growth. And at the same time, it is complex because exactly what you said, we're parents, where some of us are in the sandwich generation where we're
Hmm.
caregivers to our own parents, and then we're also
Yes.
parenting younger folks, and we have a lot of demands on our time. And so the thought of adding another goal to that or adding something to stretch us can feel incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah.
So if somebody values growth and wants to grow and feels like they have the bandwidth to grow and wants to set goals, well, I'm gonna talk about that in a second. But if somebody feels like, "No, thank you, that's not that right now, my season of life is not lean in, it's lean out,"
Mhm,
then
mhm.
beautiful, do that too.
Yes,
You do
yes.
you. So you do you, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with growing, there's nothing wrong with just, like, making sure that you're whole, complete, and taking care of yourself with whatever
Mhm.
season you are in life. But if you do wanna grow, I will say, I think close to 90% or greater than 90% of folks are way under, kind of undervaluing what they are able to accomplish in,
Mhm.
let's say, a year, what they're able to accomplish in a year. I think you may have heard this. I think a lot of us are really good at overestimating how much we can accomplish in a day or a year, and then we
Mhm.
get really mad at ourselves. Oh, I didn't do all this on my to-do list. But then we forget like what's actually capable for us in a year. And I think it's because a lot of things. Number one, we're so afraid to fail, so we don't want to
Yes.
dream too big. I think
Mhm.
for those that are failure averse, which are a lot of type A high functioning folks, if you're really
Yes.
failure averse, you're going to set smaller goals. Even if you think your goals are big, you're probably
Mhm.
limiting yourself. The other big reason is we don't actually know what's possible if we've never done it. I think
Right.
that's the biggest reason. I'll tell you for me, as you know, I've named all the sort of hyphens of everything I've done. And now in this current season as an entrepreneur, I have had so much fun. I'll tell you one thing I've learned is that entrepreneurship, if you're going to go in the game and you're going to decide you're going to be successful, it's going to be a whole lot of learning about yourself because
Yes.
you butt up against so many things that, and if you're going to stay in the game, you got to figure out why you do things the way you do and how to do them differently. And in the beginning, I'm just looking back at the goals that I would set and how hilarious it was now, because now the way I used to think is like, what would drive me is like, I don't want to fail. And now what drives me is what's possible. Ooh, this is exciting. What
Yes.
else is possible? And
Yes.
so, but in order to do that, you have to know about the brain and how it works and the science behind the brain and the limitations the brain will give you and how to
Right.
push past those limitations. And
Yes.
for me, as a big geeky nerd, I'm such a science nerd and I love the way the brain works. I think it's super fun.
I really like where you're going there, and one of the questions I wanna ask that I have found helpful in my own life and journey, also dealing with the brain and what it wants to limit us to doing, is asking myself the question, "Is it true?" Is this thought that I just had about what I can or cannot do, is it true? How do I know? Right? And that's getting to your point. I also used to be the person who was, I'm scared to fail. Fear of failure is going to drive everything I do. And certainly in my 20s, that was true. I love where your thought went. My thought that I've changed from that is I don't care what failure feels like. I don't want to live with regret. And I certainly don't want to die with regret. And so that has become much more open minded experience for me to reset and recalibrate. I also do want to call out what you said, and for our listener who is in that stage of life, who is like, you want me to grow? Are you crazy out of your mind? I'm going to turn this off right now, right? Because that can't happen. That doesn't mean it won't happen. It's just not the right time. And you called that out really beautifully. And I appreciate you pointing that out because it's not always a season of growth. We know that looking at creation, like the trees take a downtime, right? And then they grow. There's a down and there's a rest and then there's a growth. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, and I love what you said about seasons. Just because you're not growing now doesn't mean you're not gonna wanna grow later. Who knows what you're gonna
Right.
wanna do now or later? Who knows? And
Right.
I whatever you decide to do is gonna be perfect for you. It's
Yes.
perfect.
Well, and you're the expert in you. You know yourself better than anyone else does. So listen to yourself. Literally have your own back. The
Mhm.
world will beat you up enough. You don't need to beat yourself up too. So very well said. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to go to a little bit of a cautious place here because I don't want to get us in trouble with politics or religions and cultures. So take this how you think is best, okay? In my practice in the middle of Missouri, I see a lot of women who have very strong opinions about what is good advice or bad advice for their bodies. And I find myself giving a lot of advice, whether it's supplements or prescription medications or compounded medications. And there's a lot of noise out there. And there's this idea that if you read any woman's magazine, they have a medical section and it talks about take your list to your doctor, right? And on the flip side, as your doctor, you come in with a list of 20 things to me, and I'm like, oh gosh, right? Like, we're never going to make it through this visit. And I'm just curious, is there advice that you've heard that it just makes your skin crawl every time you hear it? Advice that women think is normal, it's natural, it's good for them to do this, but it's actually harmful.
I don't know why this is the first thing that came to mind, but probably vaccines. I that's probably the first thing that came to mind right now when you
Yeah.
say that. I think when it comes to women's health, the fact of the matter is that medicine has been run by men since medicine has been founded. It's been like many institutions, a patriarchal institution, which means there hasn't been sufficient research for women's health. There hasn't been research around what's happening to our bodies, which is why we're now just recently debunking all these studies that have to do with hormone
Yes.
replacement. And why, again, I'm going to say again, why I'm so grateful that doctors like you exist, because all of this is brand new and there hasn't been the leadership there because there was just women weren't given the opportunity and the
Mhm.
funding and all of the things that we need. So in terms of the data out there for women, there's not enough. And I'm so happy that
Yeah.
we're having more. And so there is a lot of sort of things that you can or cannot do that people are sharing out there that sort of, I'd say, influencers are sharing that might not be true, and really anchoring on you know your body best, you know your body better than a doctor. And I'm going to respond to that in a second, but I will
Yep.
say what the one thing that really it's just disheartening for me is the questions about vaccines. I mean, we're seeing more measles. We saw more measles cases in the last week than we have seen in the last 20 years, in the
Yes.
last 100 years. And that's really heartbreaking for me because I'm a doctor that sees patients in the emergency department. And so if we don't have herd immunity, then nobody is safe.
Yeah.
We're not taking care of our very elderly population and we're not taking care of our babies. And
Mhm.
so that's just that I will say is it's tough. It's a tough one to deal with because it doesn't just affect you. There are other
Yeah.
things that are out there that if you're choosing to do it or not to do it, it only affects you. But this one is affecting everybody. It's affecting community.
That's a wise point to bring out, and that is the difference, is that other people are impacted. I would hope nobody listening would get in their car and drive when they were drunk because of the risk to themselves and to other people, and vaccines can have a similar ripple effect with or without them. That's a really good example that we're actively hearing about it in the news, as we're recording in January of 2026, that it's a cause of debate, and it really gets to one of the reasons I created this show, which is w COVID didn't cause people to lose trust in medicine. It unmasked a distrust that was already there, but it certainly amplified the discussion around this. And you can go on any social forum and see both opinions, pro or against vaccines. But maybe take it just one more moment and explain to our listeners We use the term herd immunity in medicine. Some people may not know what that is. And then why is natural immunity not good enough? Why can't we just get the disease and move forward? And you and I have the medical background on this, right? But at a fundamental level, what is this about?
Mm, yeah. So natural immunity works for some people, but it's not going to work 100% of the time. So if you're a mother of, let's say, 3 kids, and we have a smallpox breakout, one of your kids may survive. One might get really, really ill and have a lot of scars from the smallpox on their face for the rest of their life, and one might not make it at all.
Mhm,
And those numbers that I made those numbers up. It might be 2 don't make it at all and 1 has
mhm.
scars. And
Yeah.
so the thing is that natural immunity for these specific illnesses that we have targeted doesn't work 100% of the time.
Mhm,
And the other thing is we don't know who's going to be vulnerable to it and who's not going to be vulnerable to it. We're not It's not because you're very, very little so we have to protect you, or you're very, very old. You could be 13 and not
mhm.
do well if you get an
Yes.
outbreak. And so it's this is the reason why for so long that civilizations have been fighting against these diseases. It's been before we've had vaccines. I mean, folks, I read a book that was detailing the story in China, and the reason I think the smallpox example came up is because that's the example that they had in the book. But in China, they were talking about how they would try to immunize their kids before immunizations existed.
Mm,
And just the way we immunize, right? So we use either live vaccine, or there's a much of different ways to make vaccines. We won't go into the science of that. But point is, they would expose somebody with a little bit of it, enough so that they can create an immune response for it before they actually get the outbreak. And so somebody would come around and they would do that before vaccines existed. And one child had been traveling with her parent when that happened, and they come back into the compound, and now it's like 5 7 years later, and there's an outbreak, and that one child that didn't wasn't there when it happened got smallpox and died. And so
mm,
point is that immunizate the concept of immunizations has been around forever, even before modern medicine, even before we've had injections, even before any of that. And it's because we know that there's going to be folks that are going to respond poorly, and we want to save people's lives. Because what if it was your daughter, or what if it was your son,
mhm.
or your
Yeah.
sister, or your brother? That's heartbreaking.
It is a little bit easy to isolate yourself when we use an us them mentality, right? It's those people that are doing it. It's them that have the problem, not me or mine. And that's just simply not true. You can There's not a perfect isolation. And you and I both have seen people who you wouldn't have expected that person to be the one who died, and yet they did. And so one of the things before COVID hit, I remember every year I'd have this discussion about flu vaccine with people. There was flu vaccine haters and lovers, right? And what I found to be effective was not to try to beat people over the head with it, but was to try to meet them where they are and give them the information to make an educated decision. And in that setting, when people realized I wasn't going to kick them out of my clinic if they didn't get the vaccine, and I wasn't going to tell them how foolish they were, what a poor example of a human, and all these other things, the rhetoric you see in these social media trails, um, really understand why did you not want to be vaccinated? What's going on, and then educating. And sometimes they would come back later and say, hey, I changed my mind, I want it, and other times they still didn't, and that was their choice. But at least, again, going back to that idea of no regrets, I didn't have regret that I hadn't given them good care because I gave them their true choice, which is all the options and the understanding to choose between them. But vaccine is a great option, so, or a great example of that question. So I know these are hard questions, and for our audience, by the way, she does not know what questions I'm gonna ask her. This is totally unscripted, and so, I feel like interrogating you a little bit, so I'll give you an easy one here, okay? When you think about your best memory from working either in the ER or your advocacy for patients, wherever that is, what was special about that best memory that made you keep going and made you knew you were exactly where you needed to be doing what you were called to do?
Wow, I have like a million best memories. Um,
That's a really blessed place to be.
yeah, yeah, you're right. It is. Maybe I'll share two. An advocacy one. I remember my early advocacy days. I would organize medical students and physicians, and there was one. I was living in California at the time, and we had a rally at the state in California, and everybody came together, and watching the medical students and the doctors work with the nurses that were there together in partnership in like a real team environment to ask for increased access to care. Like that was the request. It's like, hey, we just want our patients to have better care. We're not asking for money. We're not asking for
Mhm.
more money for us. And listen, funding is a whole different, and I'm a big fan of making sure we have the right funding for
Yes.
hospitals, but we weren't asking for any of that. All we were asking was we just wanted better care for our patients. We wanted them to have better access. And watching them do that together, and then watching the staffers of the Congress members that when we were lobbying, watching them respond to that, like, hey, I'm just a doctor. I work a lot of hours. I don't have a ton of free time, and I'm here with my nurse together because this is what we're seeing in our hospital and our clinics and our emergency departments, and it's really tough. And using direct examples of the patients that they're seeing and how it would make a really big difference if we can get Bill XYZ passed because this would mean blah blah blah. Um, and watching them be like, holy smokes, like, and these are like really smart, well-informed people, they've gone through professional degrees, and it was just so heartwarming to see them responding, and for me to like have the gift to organize them and bring them together to ask for what it is that we knew our community needed, that our patients needed. In clinical care, girlfriend, I can just tell you like a million stories, but I'll share. There was a hospital where I worked for a very long time, and it's probably one of my favorites because we got to see under-resourced patients that in a resourced facility, in an emergency department that had everything. We even had 24-hour chaplain care. And
Mm.
if you know anything about ER, that's a gift. And and a lot of our patients were Spanish speaking, and we did not have a lot of Spanish speaking doctors. We had two. I was one of them. And um and it was such a gift because I had a great relationship with the nurses there. And when a Spanish speaking patient would come in, they'd always come and ask, hey, so and so doesn't speak English. Do you mind taking them? Do you mind being? And the answer was always 100%. Yes, of course I will. And it was always such a blessing to see in my patients' eyes, like how grateful they were that they can talk in their language. Somebody's going to understand them, and not just understand the words, but understand what all of this stuff meant, the culture behind
Yes.
it. Everything has a story, right?
Yes.
And so to understand all of that, it's a really big deal to have doctors that are culturally competent, that can understand not just not just what it means to say I have a fever, but all of the other stuff that led to having the fever and what you've been doing to take care of it. All of that, it makes a really big difference. And that, I think, for me, I still think about it. I took my daughter to watch a Broadway show, and it's called the Buena Vista Social Club. It's amazing. It's out right now in case anybody wants to watch it. It's the first Broadway show on Broadway that's in Spanish. It's in
Okay.
English, but the music is all in Spanish.
Wow.
And it's a story about Cuba. And we left, and my daughter wanted to get her playbill signed, so we were waiting for them to sign the playbill. And all the actors come out to sign the playbills, and this is the main cast, and they're signing the playbills. And the guy looks at me and he says, "Thank you for bringing your daughter." And he tells me in English, and then he tells me again in Spanish, and I almost started crying because I was like, "Holy smokes!" To have somebody on Broadway talk to me in Spanish after doing like that's unheard of. I've
Yeah.
never been to a Broadway show before where they've had anything in Spanish. And then I just thought, like, this must be what my patients feel.
Mm.
It's just such a
Yeah.
gift. Oof, I'm
I
getting
love
a little
that.
just like, yeah, just emotional thinking about it. Why it's so important to have diversity in professional spaces.
Mhm. And maybe say a little bit more about that because I'm not sure that our audience necessarily understands what that means within our profession. There's a lot of different things they can see in the media about diversity, but what does it mean to have someone who looks like you taking care of you versus not, and outcomes and measurable metrics and things that we know from the data, not necessarily the emotional experience part.
Yeah. Yeah. What we know from the data is that patients are likelier to follow through and have with their actual treatment plan and have better healthcare outcomes when they trust their doctor. We also know that they're highly unlikely to trust doctors that don't look like them, and they're likelier to trust doctors that look like them, that speak the language that they speak, and that are able to take time with their patients. And I'm not saying that you need a one for one. You, although it is wonderful to have somebody that looks like you taking care of you and that understands you taking care of you. And that's for a lot of reasons. As an example, let's say I give my patient a treatment plan, and the patient, most patients, and you can probably relate to this, Amy, probably not your current patient population, but before, are going to want to make you happy. They're just going to say, yeah, 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 I get it, I get it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And usually we're so busy that we just say, great. I explained to them what to do. They say they got it. I gave them a piece of paper. It's done. And that's just not the way it works. Half the patients are not going to understand half the things you say to them. They're not going to remember what you say to them. And they're not going to have the courage to ask you what you mean when you're in the exam room. And if you can slow down, if you can speak their language, if you can even have like the foresight to say, where are you going to pick up these prescriptions? Do you have a pharmacy, or who's going to drive you, 78-year-old woman that doesn't speak English and
Right.
can barely get around? Who's going to drive you to pick up these medicines? And how are you going to make sure that you have a low salt diet so you're not back into the emergency department? Like having that level of conversation with the patient, that's pretty unique. And that makes all of the difference when we think about patient outcomes.
Yes. Not only is it unique for what you just described, it's unique because most physicians and advanced practice providers are doing it in a context where they're rushed, where they're already having multiple other people in the queue waiting for them. And there's a lot of internal anxiety and angst that they're not doing enough anyway. So, very, very well said. I came across the concept of diversity in medicine and medical school. And so there has at least been an introduction to the idea of this for physicians for a bit, but I don't think it's necessarily showing up in outcomes consistently across our country that I've seen. And one of the things that goes right along with it, and maybe they're interchangeable terms, I think of them a little differently, but health literacy. And you talked about how people don't want to speak up. What's interesting, I do have a population that's highly educated. But what's interesting to me is they still don't want to admit if they don't know anything, any more than
Mm,
I don't want to admit to my accountant or my lawyer or whoever else that I don't really understand what they said. That
mm,
when I go see my attorney, I'm really picturing Law& and Order on TV a little bit, right? And so, as I've reflected on those experiences in myself, I've started to change how I talk to people to say, "What do you understand about your lab so far? Where are you at in your thinking about this? Bring me up to speed with where you're at." And that approach for me has made a difference in how I connect with my patients because it gives them the room to say, "I don't know. Show me what I
yeah.
should know." And that's a really beautiful place to build trust too.
Yeah, that is so awesome that you do that, that you've reframed that. I'm thinking, I taught a class for about, geez, maybe 5 to 7 years, and it was about empathy and compassion in medicine. And it was in the context of decreasing your malpractice risk. How do
Oh,
you
interesting.
not get sued as much? And the data shows that it doesn't matter. If the negligence doesn't matter, what actually gets doctors sued is when they're not showing up for their patients, they're not being
Mhm.
kind, they're not being thoughtful, compassionate, things like that. But we also know that when you are compassionate, that when you are kind to your patients will also have a better outcome because you're creating psychological safety so that they can tell
Yes.
you, I don't actually understand that. I don't actually. And so that is huge. So health literacy is big, and creating psychological safety for your patients, that makes a world of a difference.
Yeah. It's interesting how so many of the things that we use in our daily work, we didn't necessarily learn in med school, right? It was the school of life and working with these wonderful individuals who let us care for them that taught us how to be better. And I think that's probably what makes me so sad about the loss of trust for the profession and for physicians as a general is that I don't think most physicians are here to take advantage of people. I don't think they have malignant intent. I think they genuinely want to help and to heal, but they really haven't been taught how to do that in a way that the patient can receive it, whether they look like that individual or not. So we still have a lot of room to go. And I imagine you can articulate that better than I did, but that's, in my own thinking, that's where I'm at. It really sucks to be a patient. I mean, my husband, myself, my children, I've navigated this with them, and it's just not set up to be a great experience as much as
Yeah.
we like to think it is when we're wearing our other hat.
And then you said, most doctors want to do the right thing. 1,000,000%. I'm going to agree
Hmm.
with that. We're human, we're kind,
Yeah,
we're compassionate, we
right.
chose a career. And it's not just that we haven't been taught, it's also most of the systems inside of organized medicine, most of the systems are not set up
Right.
for that sacred relationship between the doctor and the patient.
Right.
Most of us, we went to medical school because that's what we want to do. And there's
Yes.
all these things that are in the way of us doing that well. And so
Yes.
we're not just given like the barriers of like, no one's taught me, the ACT empathy skills is like what I used
Mhm.
to teach. No one's taught me that. It's also that on top of that, you're also having to do X number, all of these things. And I don't think many listeners know the type of things that physicians have to do inside of the walls of medicine sometimes that
Right.
are not under the job description of a physician, but there's no one else that will do them. And there's no way sometimes that an insurance company is going to pay for the care that we're asking for prescribing if the doctor doesn't go and do all of those things.
Right.
And it makes it really, 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 really tough to provide you excellent care, provide patients excellent care, which would when that's all we want to do.
Mhm. There's competing interests, and as much as we don't want to think about it, the medicine is a business and it's a calling. And the business side of medicine right now is really drowning out those who are trying to work in their calling. And I say that part broadly to include nurses and therapists and all the other people. It makes me really angry how much other people have a say in what we try to do for our patients and how the same insurance carrier can have different plans and one person gets something and another person doesn't. That just really makes me angry.
Yeah. It's
That's a
why I
talk for
think
another day, I suppose. But what makes you angry about how it's handled?
But you know what? It actually makes me, it's one of the reasons why I think physician leadership is so important because I wouldn't want anybody else in charge of the operations unless they know exactly what the patient's going to experience.
Right.
When I was a physician leader for so long, I felt like I was being in the biggest like acts of service that I could be because I wasn't just in service to one patient, I was in
Mhm.
service to all of the community. And I
Yes.
was also helping our docs get all the muck out of the way so that they
Mhm.
could just come and take care of patients. So it's one of the reasons why I continue to be a huge advocate for physicians who want to lead and train them to do their job and not burn out and continue to be
Mhm.
able to be in service because that's who we need leading. We need people that care about their patients
Right.
leading systems.
Right. And no matter how many times we're told that there's physicians helping in different layers, whether it's big pharma or insurance or hospitals or a community center, right? That doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in each place. And it doesn't mean that just because they're there, they're more than a rubber stamp. And I don't mean that to be ugly, but that's the reality. And I don't think patients realize how little control doctors actually have of the whole healthcare experience.
Yeah.
That this is wow, I need to stop now because I will definitely get us going down a whole another talk about that. That is another day talk. But, as we close, if our listeners wanna get a hold of you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, I have if you're listening here and you like podcasts, you can find me on my podcast. It's called The Authentic Path with Dr. Vanessa Calderón, so it's not too different from yours. It's called The Authentic Path. I'm on every streaming platform and YouTube as well. And you can find me on Instagram. That's where I hang out the most at Vanessa Calderon MD. At Vanessa Calderon MD.
I love it. Thank you. Before I let you escape, what's one piece of advice? Maybe one you said earlier in the show, maybe something different. What is one piece of advice you wanna leave our listeners with?
You are in charge. You are in charge of your life. You are in charge of your body. You have agency. So, whatever you feel like has control over you, they don't. That's just what Amy was saying earlier. Those are thoughts that might not be true. So you are 100% in charge and meet that thought that I just shared with you with so much self-compassion because for so long we have been told that we're not in charge of our bodies, we're not in charge of our time. We're not in charge of what we say yes or no to. We can't set boundaries, but that's just not true. You're in charge.
Oh, thank you. So good. Dr. Vanessa, you've been such a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for spending the time and really donating your time and energy to sharing with us today. For our listeners, if something in today's conversation resonated, it's because you're not alone and you're not imagining it. So you can find more support and resources and next steps in the show notes. You can reach out to Dr. Vanessa. If something that I'm doing is something you need help with, reach out to us. If this episode helped you feel seen, heard, encouraged, share it with another woman who needs to hear it too. We'll see you next time.